What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 4040 Vision podcast. I am your host, Khaled Abdallah, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Sulman Haque. What's up, brother? How you doing?
Yo, what's going on, man?
Not much. So the topic of today's episode is the 2024 NFL season. So in the preseason, we did a over-under prediction for every team in the NFL. On that podcast, we went in order of FanDuel predicted lines. This time around, we're going to go by division. So we'll talk about each team's predicted over-under before the season, our predictions, and of course the true outcome, and of course how wrong or right we were about each of the teams. So we'll start with the NFC North, which was the best division in the NFL, maybe the NFC East. Bit of a toss-up there, maybe AFC West. Shit, there's a lot of good divisions in this. There wasn't a lot of parity, I'll say that, in this year's NFL. So we'll start with the Detroit Lions, the number one seed in the NFC. Their preseason line was 10.5 games, and they blew past that. They went 15-2, and we both predicted the over. Of course, we were both right. So what did we get right about the Lions?
Yeah, I think we were both thought, Lions, great offense. Defense was going to be pretty solid as well. So I think then that's what happened. I mean, the Lions, even despite the injuries to their defense, somehow ended the season with only 2 losses. Like that's amazing. But they're just an offensive juggernaut, and that's what we were saying in the preseason, and that's what they showed up in this season, right? They're just an offensive juggernaut. Even if their defense gives up 40 points, they're probably dropping 50 points on you. So that's what the Lions did, and that's how they got to 15-2 here.
And they ended up, I think, with 17 guys on injured reserve, which is just bonkers. It's an insane number, and it's big name guys. I think their starting middle linebacker, Malcolm Rodriguez, Aiden Hutchinson, David Montgomery missed some time. I think he's going to be back this weekend, but this was a team where I think they would have been forgiven, I guess is the word, if they did struggle down the stretch and they did end up, falling short. Or I think we always thought they were going to make the playoffs, but maybe if they didn't win the division, but instead they just went the complete other direction and took over the division, which was, again, probably one of the best in the NFL. They had a couple fluke wins here and there. Maybe that Thanksgiving win against Chicago was a little fluky, but nothing else was fluky. I think everything about their performance is sustainable. The fact that they don't have to go outdoors for the rest of the season. And they are one of the teams that have a rare home field advantage. And I think this was your preseason Super Bowl pick, so it's looking good.
Yep, it's looking good.
All right. The Minnesota Vikings, their over-under coming into the season was 7.5. And both of us were laughing. Both of us went hard under on this. They, of course, went way over, almost doubling their predicted win total, going 14-3. And they probably would have went 16-1 if it wasn't for the Detroit Lions. So what did we get so wrong about the Vikings here?
We were absolutely wrong about Sam Darnold. I think that was the biggest issue we had was, Sam Darnold's a quarterback. Sam Darnold's not good. And man, he came out on fire this season. I think the other thing we got wrong a little bit was I think we were underestimating how good their defense was. Their defense showed up in a major way. They bailed them out of a few games where even Sam Darnold didn't look great. So they definitely got bailed out for a few games by their D as well. So I think Sam Darnold was a lot better than we anticipated, and their defense was better than we anticipated. And those two things give them a good outcome here. And also, I think they had a slightly favorable schedule, right, as well. So,
well, I think along with everybody else, completely underestimated Sam Darnold, of course, like you said. But I think that's expected, right? It's Sam Darnold. It's kind of like, okay, if somebody's bad for 5 years, 6 years, and then all of a sudden he's good, it's not our fault that we got it wrong. But the defense, I guess we should have taken a closer look at the defense. They do have some playmakers. Van Ginkel's out there, Harrison Smith, Greenard. So they had guys. And of course, Brian Flores is one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL. Maybe not the best head coach, which I think some folks will go back and forth with you on that. But we definitely didn't give the defense enough credit. Everything else, we're like, okay, Aaron Jones, he's good. Of course, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, all the pieces were there. We just didn't believe in Sam Darnold. And the funny thing is, the Zodiac GM, who I spoke to earlier this week, he was high on this team coming into the season. So, I mean, maybe there's something to it. I don't know what the signs were, but he was saying the synergy was there with Kevin O'Connell and Sam Darnold and Justin Jefferson. So it was all there for us to see. And they end up 9th in offense and 5th in defense. And I mean, it's unfortunate that they're not a division winner. They're not going to get to host a game. But before we move on to Green Bay, what's your take on that? Do you think the NFL should just seed by record?
I do. Yeah, I do. I think the NBA had this problem like a couple years back, right? Where it was like, 10 years ago, where they were like, oh, the lower ranked, like didn't have the best record, but they won the division and they were hosting the first round or whatever, right? I think the NFL's got to do away with it, right? Winning division gets you into the playoffs, but doesn't guarantee you hosting a game.
Yeah, I was thinking something along the lines of if the difference in the record is more than 3 wins or two wins, I think is fair. That's 2 wins is a decent percentage of your schedule. Maybe 3 if you want to be extreme, because you're like, okay, that's 20% of your schedule or something. Like in this case, obviously, I think they're traveling to L.A. Maybe not L.A. Maybe they end up in Arizona because of the fires, but that's a 4-game difference. So in that case, they would host the game, but of course, L.A. still gets in the playoffs because they won their division, even if they were 8-9 or whatever. So yeah, I think that's fair. What do you think? Like a 3-game difference, a 3-win difference in between the teams?
I wouldn't even do that. I'd just be like, hey, if like the Vikings were 10-6 and the Rams were 9-7, I'd still let the Vikings host. Like I'd be like, better record, you host.
I get it. I think there's arguments on both sides. All right, for sure. The Green Bay Packers, they predicted over under, or the line before the season was 9.5. They go over it by a game and a half. We'll end up 11-6. We both went over. I think we both liked this team coming in. So what did we get right about this team?
Yeah, we were on the Jordan Love hype train, right? So he played pretty well. Had some injuries. Josh Jacobs, we knew was gonna do pretty well, and he did. I think he exceeded what I thought he was gonna do. He played even better than I anticipated, and we knew they had a pretty solid defense, and all those things held up true in the season. And that's why the Packers were an 11-win team.
Yeah, I had really high expectations for him. I was saying like 5,000 yards, 30 touchdowns. I mean, he didn't quite get there. He had about 3,400 yards, so I maybe need to pump the brakes on it. There was some games where he looked great. Some games he didn't look so great. I think some of it had to do with the injury, because even if he only missed 2 games, I think the first few games back, as a fantasy owner, he always had that red questionable or even the doubtful tag on his next to his name. So I think maybe next year he'll probably be able to step more into his role and hopefully stay healthy. But yeah, there was a lot to like about this team. They end up 8th in offense in points scored and 6th in points allowed. So balanced team, just like the Vikings and the Lions. So again, just another case for this being the best division in the NFL, but we were spot on. We'll give us credit for that. Last in the division, the Chicago Bears. So coming into the season, their line was 8.5 wins. We both went under, but I think for different reasons. What did we get wrong about this team? Or, sorry, what did we get right? Because we both predicted the under.
I think we both knew Caleb Williams was going to struggle a bit. I thought he was going to struggle a lot. You were a little more confident in Caleb, but I was not a believer in Caleb this year. The Bears O-line, I think you were also like...
Before you continue, you actually predicted his stat line exactly.
Did I really? What?
Except for the rushing touchdowns. I think you went a little crazy. You said 10 rushing touchdowns. I think you might have misspoke, but you said 3,500 yards and 20 touchdowns, and that's exactly what he had.
There you go. Damn. Okay.
I said 4,030, but yeah, you were on point. So yeah, sorry. Continue.
I mean, he had a good season by all accounts. It's just, I don't know, their offense was weird. They never looked like they were ever in sync. I think a lot of that has to do with their O-line problems. I mean, Caleb was running for his life out there. He had to make plays, but they were down big, so that's why he got a lot of yards down at the end there. I think I don't know. They got to fix the offensive line, and I think everything else will fall into place for them. Their defense is average. It can probably be better, but it was average. They made some boneheaded plays, right? Like they give that Hail Mary touchdown to the Commanders, and they lose that game. That's just like their season in a nutshell, right? Boneheaded plays, and that's a lot of what they did.
Yeah, 3 games you can point to that would have swung. I mean, they still would have finished under if they won those games, but of course the Hail Mary, which they were 4-2 at the time, and then they ended up going on a 10-game losing streak after that. So that like broke the team mentally and spiritually. The other one was the Thanksgiving loss to Green Bay, where because of clock management issues, they just didn't call a timeout, and they could have kicked a field goal to send it into overtime, and then they did it again. I'm forgetting the team that they did it against, but it was the interim coach that made the same mistake. I'm totally blanking on who the third game was against, but I said the defense was going to be good. They ended up being 13th, which probably would have been better with a better offense. But yeah, we both predicted some struggles. But again, you were spot on with the stat line. But I think there's a lot to be excited about. I don't think my family and my in-laws are all Bears fans, and they're split. Some of them are really negative and pessimistic on Caleb, and some of them are super high on him. But I'm like, that's his rookie year, considering all the turmoil, the offensive line getting sacked. I think I said 68 times. Like, I think that was not quite a record. David Carr, I think, has the record for like 73 times his rookie year, but pretty damn close. So, what do you think? Do you think there's a lot to be excited about here?
I think so. I mean, they got a good young quarterback. I think he's just going to grow. They just got to build that line. They got to protect the guy, right? And then they got a decent young wide receiver in Roma. Defense is looking pretty decent. Add a piece there or two. There's a lot to be excited about, right? The only thing that doesn't excite me is they play in the NFC North, so one of the toughest divisions. I mean, I'm sure the Vikings and Packers will regress and the Lions will regress, so maybe there's some opportunity there. But I mean, I'd be excited about the Bears' outlook in the next 2-3 years.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Next, the NFC East. So we agreed on all these as well. So we don't disagree until the NFC West, which is kind of ironic. But we'll start with the Philadelphia Eagles. Coming into the season, their line was 10.5 wins. They blow past that, going 14-3. We both predicted the over. What did we get right about this team?
Yeah, I think we both thought Saquon was going to be a big boost to this offense, and he was. Man, he could have had the rushing record if they didn't sit him that last game, or possibly had it, right? They're just a regular season monster, right? And Saquon just solidified that. They have the pieces, they have the talent. They keep finding like diamond in the rough kind of dudes, like they're starting left tackles, like another undrafted, the 7th round guy or something like that from Australia, and like he's like not like an all pro left tackle now. So they do things like that. They draft well, they find the right pieces, they play well. They just for whatever reason can't show up in the playoffs, and we'll find out again this year if they show up or not. And Jalen Hurts is already hurt, so it's a good problem.
Yeah, we're recording this on Thursday, so a couple days before their divisional matchup against Tampa Bay. No, not Tampa Bay. Why am I blanking on this?
It's Tampa. You're right. I think it's Tampa.
No, because Tampa won the division.
Tampa's Commanders. So, Commanders, yeah.
There you go.
Are they playing the Rams?
No,
Vikings
they're
are
not playing
the
the Rams. Why are we so bad at this?
Are they playing the Packers? They're playing the Packers.
They're playing the Packers, who they beat in week 1 in Brazil on that weird slippery field. Yeah, I was high on this team coming in, and then after the first 2-3 weeks, I was not so high on them. I was skeptical of their defense, and then all of a sudden, all the talent that they had on defense, Jalen Carter was playing at like an all-pro level, Darius Slay was showing up, Nolan Smith, all these other dudes. Once they started playing the two white guys in the defensive backfield, Blankenship and DeJean, and then they have a rookie that's like a potential all-pro in Quinion Mitchell, who was their first-round pick. So the Eagles are they're just a great organization. Like you said, they found their left tackle in the late rounds or undrafted, whatever he is. Jordan Mailata is his name. So they're just a great organization, regular season monster, like you said. I think it's unfair for you to say they didn't show up in the playoffs, considering they're like a year removed from a Super Bowl appearance. So I think that's a little unfair
2 years
for Chris.
2 years.
Was it 2 years?
2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, whatever.
2 years.
This iteration of the team.
They didn't show up. I feel like they had a lot of luck even that Super Bowl run, right? They ran into like some injury prone teams, right? They didn't like steamroll through that. They played the Niners in the NFC Championship game with their like CMC at quarterback, bro. Like that or something like their running back at quarterback. Like that was
you know
crazy.
What?
But anyways, I'm just saying they had a lot of favorable luck in that run to the Super Bowl.
It's not injury luck when you cause the injury. It's not.
Okay. So
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
It's not.
They're a dirty team. They're a dirty team. I was trying not to say that, but you said it for me. Thank you, Khaled.
The hit on Brock Purdy was not dirty. It was a clean hit. It's not like Brock Purdy, scrambled.
I'm not saying that's dirty.
That's what I'm saying. It's not like he rolled out left and just kind of had a non-contact injury. They hit him in the elbow and he tore his elbow up, and that was that. I think it's an unfair label, but yes, Saquon was incredible, 2,000 yards. I'm glad they didn't play him. I think it would have cheapened the award or the record a little bit. It is 17 games versus 16 games. I know eventually people don't care. Like nobody looks at Eric Dickerson and says, oh, well, you did it in 16 and OJ did it in 14. Like, I don't think people make that distinction. But to me, I don't think it matters. I think it's better. It's a more important thing that he gets healthy, especially if Jalen Hurts is going to be limited. But yeah, they end up 7th in offense, 2nd in defense, even though there was times where they had some weird drama around them. You remember the whole thing with their passing offense and I don't know, just maybe it's Sirianni, maybe because it's Philly. There's just always drama around there and talk and the fans boo and all that stuff. I feel like there's always something going on there, even though there shouldn't be. And of course, they go 14-3 and steamroll the division. So anyway, next team, probably the surprise of the season, the Washington Commanders. Coming into the season, their line was 6.5. We both went under. I think we thought they would be exciting, but we definitely didn't predict this. So what did we get wrong on this team that ends up going 12-5? So another team that basically doubles their projected win total.
Yeah, I mean, Jaden Daniels was really good. He's very impressive. He had command of this offense from the get-go. They played really well. Their defense was not horrible, right? We thought their defense was going to be absolutely dead last or close to dead last, and I think they were middle of the pack or close to the top 10. So they played well both offensively.
They were like 20-ish. Something
were
like
they 20th?
Like
okay, 20th-ish. Okay,
20th.
I mean, they weren't like horrendous, right? They weren't horrendous.
Yeah,
like we thought they were going to be like the bottom of the bottom.
You thought? Their offense was, I didn't.
I thought. Okay, I thought. I did kind of change my tone on them a little bit, like on them as like after I watched the first week of Jaden Daniels, I was like, oh damn, they might be a dark horse like playoff team now. Like after watching him week 1, I was like, I was totally after week 1, I was like, oh damn, I'm already wrong about these guys when I saw them play. So
Jaden
Daniels,
they lost to Tampa too. Yeah, they lost to Tampa that week, but they looked good doing it. Yeah,
they looked good doing it. So and he looked like he already was like in command of that offense week 1. So I knew that maybe I was wrong about this already.
Yeah, my concern was he was going to get popped and miss a few games. He ends up missing part of games. I think he didn't finish the game against Carolina, but they were blowing him out. And then week 18, they pulled him out early against Dallas. But he had an incredible season. He's probably going to be the rookie of the year. He had 3,500 yards, 25 touchdowns, another 900 rushing yards, and 6 touchdowns. What I think was the difference was defense obviously was pretty good, or good enough, I should say. But I think a lot of people clown the veteran additions that they made. They signed a bunch of old dudes. They signed Zach Ertz and Bobby Wagner and Austin Eckler. They get 2 kind of cast-off guys from Carolina. And people were like, why are you signing all these old dudes? And they end up being huge contributors. Bobby Wagner had like 150 tackles. Zach Ertz was good for them. And all of a sudden, you're looking around and you're like, wait, they have a lot of weapons on offense. They got, Scary Terry and Brian Robinson and Eckler while he was healthy. So it was just like the pieces came together in a way that I think we didn't predict and a lot of people didn't predict until probably like week 2. You're like, okay, we're wrong on these guys. They're definitely winning more than 6-7 games if he's healthy. So speaking of winning 6-7 games, the Dallas Cowboys. Coming into the season, their predicted win total was 9.5. We both went over. They go slightly under with 7 wins. So they go 7-10. What did we get wrong about this team?
I don't know if we got anything wrong necessarily. It's just Dak gets injured, and that's kind of the season right there, right? Once Dak gets hurt, the offense is not as good as they were. I mean, I think their defense was pretty decent. They had some injuries on the defense as well. That kind of limited them a bit, but I mean, it was just injuries. Like, I don't know why. The Cowboys, somehow Dak always finds a way to get hurt, and somehow they always have injuries to their key players on defense. that's just kind of what happened this season. And obviously it's hard to predict those things when they happen, but I think that was really what kind of threw us off here on Dallas.
Yeah, they had a really weird season. Dak only plays 8 games. He's 3-5 in those games, but I don't know if you want to like parse through those 8 games, see who they played and all. That doesn't really matter. But you would think in the 9 games that he missed, they win half of those, so they end up, yeah, again, like maybe not a playoff team, but yeah, somewhere in that 9-10 range. 12 guys on season-ending IR, DeMarcus Lawrence, Trayvon Diggs. They had a really weird running back situation, which I think we called out before the season. We're like, Ezekiel Elliott, Alvin Cook, I think this is like the 2016 All-Stars. And they just didn't play Rico Dowdle, who's not that great, but he was the best back on their team, and for some reason they didn't want to play him. And I think because of those injuries on defense, particularly, the defense ended up being awful. I think the defense was like in the high 20s. Maybe if Dak is still here, yeah. So I guess we didn't get it that wrong, but it's okay. We'll see if Mike McCarthy's there next year. I think he is, and they'll just come back with Dak because he's locked up on a long-term contract, and we just kind of get back on this Cowboys hamster wheel again. Last in the division, the New York Giants. Projected win total 6.5. We both went hard under on the 6.5, and we were both right. So what did we get right about this team?
I mean, we were spot on. Like we said, the Giants are just terrible in both facets of the game, right? Offense, defense. Daniel Jones is an answer. They have a weird situation with Daniel Jones in the middle of the season. He gets cut. He goes to the Vikings. It's a super weird season for the Giants. I mean, I don't know how you just 1 year after like giving this guy a contract extension, you cut him in the middle of the season. But we knew, right? Daniel Jones wasn't the answer. Their defense wasn't great. So yeah, I think it's just going to be more of the same for the Giants. I'm surprised they didn't fire their head coach, but that's it. It's just going to be more of the same. Like I don't know until they get their franchise quarterback and do some things on defense differently. I don't know where they're heading. But I mean, yeah, Malik Neighbors was exciting.
Yeah, I was going to say he's one of the few bright spots. Maybe Tyrone Tracy, I think 5th or 6th round pick, ends up being their starting running back. I was high on him coming into the draft. Their defense was actually not terrible. It was 21st, and we talked about the season. We're like, they don't have blue chippers, and then I look at their defensive line now, and I'm like, okay, they do. Dexter Lawrence, one of the best D tackles in the NFL. Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, and you're like, okay, this is a group here, but of course they end up being 31st on offense. And Neighbors, who you mentioned, he had like the rookie record for 2 hours before Brock Bowers broke it. But he did it in 15 games. He had 109 catches for 1,200 yards and 7 touchdowns in 15 games. And he caught passes from 4 different quarterbacks. They said it was Locke, Daniel Jones, who's a third guy,
Tommy
DeVito, and then Tim Boyle, the YouTube superstar guy that never didn't even start in college. One of the great mysteries of the NFL. So yeah, not too much to get excited about, but I think they have the 3rd overall pick, and maybe they get Cam Ward. So there's something to be excited about, or Shedeur Sanders. We'll see how that goes. All right, this is where we start to differ. The NFC West. The winners of the NFC West, the Los Angeles Rams. Coming into the season, their projected win total was 8.5. They go over, going 10-7. You went under, I went over. So what did you get wrong about this team?
I was down on Stafford, and Stafford had an okay season, better than what I anticipated. And then their defense was better than I anticipated. Seems like they got some blue chipper guys on there now. Like the guys they took, Jarrett Verse, Byron Young, another guy they drafted, I forget his name, but second round pick. But
who's sick?
Fisk, yes, Braden Fisk. Yeah, Fisk. Braden Fisk. Yeah. So they got some good players on defense too, right? And somehow their cornerbacks are pretty solid. Like Akilla Witherspoon starting for them. I was like, damn, where did that guy go? And he was on the Rams. I was like, damn, he's making plays against us when we were playing. Then I was like, he's still in the league. I didn't know that. So yeah, they just got decent. I think this Stafford played almost all the games. He didn't miss any games, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
he missed one
Stafford
game.
was healthy. He missed one game. Stafford was pretty healthy.
The last game, I think he sat. I think he was healthy every other game.
Yeah. And then, obviously they struggled a little bit with Puka Nakao not being there at the beginning, but once he came on board, they just took off. So And I think they benefited from other teams not being as good in the NFC West. So like
Your
I don't
boys.
know. Definitely from the Niners having the season from hell, but we'll get there.
Yeah, we will get there once we get to the bottom of the division. But yeah, they swept the division, I believe, and that was the difference. So they only got 4 wins outside of the division. They had a weird season, right? They started 1-4, but they bounced back. And what I liked about them was the coach quarterback combination. I was like, okay, they're going to go over because I think that foundation is strong. I definitely didn't think Puka was only going to play 11 games or Cooper Kupp was only going to play 12, and some of them kind of overlap. They overlapped for a few games there as well. I mean, Kyron Williams was incredible, 1,300 yards, 14 rushing touchdowns, I think another 3 receiving touchdowns. So he was incredible for them, really carried that offense during the stretch where the other guys were hurt. And that defense, it was okay. They ended up being 17th in defense. That's pretty good, considering, of course, losing a Hall of Fame talent, and Jared Verse that you mentioned is probably going to be the Rookie of the Year. And they ended up winning the division at the 5th tiebreaker, which was crazy. So maybe they didn't sweep the Seattle. I don't remember. We'll look at the schedule, but they won it. Yeah, based on the 5th tiebreaker. It wasn't strength of schedule or strength of victory that had them winning the division. So it was a real close call. Speaking of the Seattle Seahawks, the projected win total was 7.5. They go over. They go 10-7 and lose the division, of course, on that tiebreaker. You went over. I went under. So you were right. I was wrong. What did you get right about this team?
Yeah, I think we just flipped our thoughts on the teams, right? Like I was like, oh, I think Geno Smith's going to be pretty good. I like their run game. JSN was a budding star in the making, and we saw this season he kind of comes into his own here. So I kind of liked that, and then I liked what they were doing on defense, and their defense was pretty decent, I think. So I think you kind of had the opposite thoughts, right? Like you were all gung ho on the Rams, but then you're like, no, Seattle, no, I'm out, right? So like you didn't like Geno Smith, I think, right? That was your thing. So you weren't a Geno Smith fan, and I knew Geno Smith would be fine. And man, he I mean, at least in the Niner games, he was using his legs. He was killing us on the ground. Like I've seen him do that. I was like, oh wow, I never seen Geno run so much. But apparently, even if you can't run, you can run against the Niners. Like that's apparently the thing here. So yeah, I think the offense was well. I'm surprised that they missed out here. I thought they were going to win the division. Just like you said, the Rams won it by like the 5th tiebreaker on the schedule, right? So
yeah, that's right, because they beat them in the last game, but it didn't matter. They beat the Rams in Week 18, but it didn't matter at that point because of all the other factors. So again, it sucks when you win 10 games and you don't make the playoffs because of how deep the NFC was. Yeah, I thought the clock was going to strike midnight on Geno. I was like, this guy's going to turn back into a pumpkin. I shouldn't have doubted him. I shouldn't have made that mistake again. Tesla had doubts on McDonald being a impact head coach right away. I thought, all right, he's going to struggle. But you look at it, they have a ton of weapons on offense. So, okay, that was good enough. But ironically enough, they were 18th in offense and 11th in defense. So the defense was much better than I thought it was going to be. They also benefited from playing the Niners twice, sweeping them. So I'll take the L. It's okay. I was wrong. No big deal. All right, Arizona. The Arizona Cardinals projected win total actually the same as Seattle, 7.5. We both went under, and they barely squeaked over. They got 8 wins, so they go 8-9, hit the over. What did we get wrong about this?
We just didn't think the Niners would suck as much, and the Cardinals would beat them twice. So that's really it. Yeah, I mean, we were both kind of down on the Cardinals.
You can end the segment right there.
We can just stop there, right? That's what it is. We can just go talk about the Niners next. But I mean, we knew Kyler Murray was going to be hit or miss, and which he was. Defense was going to be up and down, which they were. The one surprising thing I would say is how bad Marvin Harrison Jr. played this season. Like people were expecting.
I disagree. I disagree.
I mean, I think he played. I mean, his stats were bad. I think he was running good routes. I think Kyler Murray was not seeing him. Like that's why it looks like he played bad. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. needs to like get out of Arizona as soon as possible and not play with Kyler Murray, like so he can live up to his potential. I think Kyler Murray's limiting him. So I'll end it there.
He had 7 touchdowns. He had 860 yards, something like that. I'm typing it in as we talk here. Yeah, 885 yards and 8 touchdowns. 60 catches. I mean, it's not terrible. We were both right. We both said that it would take him some time to build up that chemistry with Kyler, which we, ended up seeing. I think it's just he's a quarterback that's going to take some time to get used to, right? If you think about who the guys that Harrison played with, I forget who the quarterback at Ohio State was last year, but he had a couple of years with C.J. Stroud, and that's a drop back pocket passer who's accurate, strong arm, all that stuff. Kyler is, of course, none of those things. He has a strong arm, but he's going to improvise. He's going to do his thing. And I think early on in the season, he made a comment like, "It's not my job to get him the ball." And I'm like, yeah, it is.
It is your job, Kyler. Yeah,
Well,
I don't like Kyler. I don't like Kyler Murray. I don't know. Like if there was like in the Niner games, like if you watch Harrison run those routes, he's running great routes. He's getting open, and Kyler's just like, I'm gonna take off. Like screw this. Like he's just bailing out when he didn't have to. And I don't know. If I'm Marvin Harrison Jr., if this happens another year, like if I have this kind of season with Kyler again next year, I'm like, trade me. Like, get me out of here. Like, I'm pulling Randy Moss. Get me out of here.
I mean, that's Kyler Murray, right? He's not like, 3-step drop, 1, 2, 3, release the ball kind of thing, or, timing routes, all that stuff. He can do all that, but it's not his game. His game is, again, create, improvise, do the thing. So it takes some time to get used to. And that's why I think with any other running quarterback, your stats are going to suffer as a receiver because maybe 5 to 7, maybe 10 passing plays a game, he's going to take off. So that's 10 opportunities for you to catch the ball. So I wasn't worried about his stats. He made some incredible plays. There was times where he just looked downright, like the best receiver in the league with some of the toe taps and stuff that his dad was known for. So I wouldn't be worried at all. And the team in general, 12th in offense, 15th in defense. So they were feisty. They just weren't quite good enough to beat some of the better teams. And that's kind of what we expected. All right. Your boys, the San Francisco 49ers, going into the season, 11.5 was their projected win total. You went under. I went over. So you were right. I don't think you knew you were going to be this right about the team. What did you see in the preseason that made you go under?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it when we were doing the previews. I was just like, it's just a weird vibe coming out of the preseason, right? It was like Ayuk's holding out. We don't know. Like we had no clue about Christian McCaffrey and his injury, right? They were just like, oh, he's gonna miss week 1, right? And then it turns out, oh damn, he missed like 10 weeks, right? It was just, I don't know, just a lot of weird things. And I don't know, like there's like the Super Bowl hangover, but I mean, there's always some sort of regression after losing the Super Bowl. There were just a lot of injuries, a lot of weird things. Like they couldn't make, like their defense just looked off for the first few weeks, and then the offense looked terrible for like 7-8 games, and then they looked good for one game. I don't know, just a really weird season, a lot of injuries and a lot of weird things just happened, right? Like they also had some some of their players lost their children, things like that. Just a really bad season for them, and really bad things happening to them. No one could have predicted it this bad. Like I was like, oh, Khaled, this will be under, but I think they might win the division. Like I was like, I think they could probably win the division still. But yeah, it was just a bad season, bad year. Hopefully they just forget this and move on next year.
Yeah, I don't want to like victory lap on an injury because that's no fun. But on CMC, I knew it was more serious than they let on. It just didn't smell right. So my prediction was they're going to keep pushing it, and then he's going to come back and get hurt again, which was exactly what happened. And if you remember, I think it was week 3, something like that. A friend of mine saw him at the SFO airport boarding a flight to Germany, to Munich.
And he looked pissed in that picture. He looked super pissed off in that picture. He was like,
wouldn't you?
Why you taking a picture?
Yeah, some random dude is taking a picture of you at the airport. He could have worked a little harder to cover himself, like put some shades on, face the window, don't make it so obvious. Yeah. But yeah. And once that happened, I was like, oh, he's going to get the Kobe treatment. He's going to get some stem cells put in that knee or Achilles or whatever it was. So it just, from that perspective, I mean, you were right. I thought they still had enough talent to push through. But of course, none of us could have predicted the disaster and everything that went wrong. Like everything that could go wrong did go wrong on and off the field. Like the only thing you were missing was like a player getting arrested for some horrible crime.
I'm sure that's happening in the offseason as we speak.
Before we move on to the last division in the NFC, Brock Purdy, is he getting $60 million a year?
God, I hope not. I think 60 million is an overpay for him. At this point, I think he's Kirk Cousins-ish. Good player. Can play well in a good offensive system with some good players around him. I don't think he's a game changer. But I mean, if that's what the quarterback market is dictating, like, hey, you got to make 50, 60, and you're going to have to do it because what options do you have, right? Like, it's not like you're going to find another like above average quarterback in the draft in the 7th round or any of these rounds. So you gotta pay what you know, right? And if you got to pay him 60, I guess you got to do it, and hopefully the cap keeps growing. But ideally, you paying him closer to like 40, 45, right? Like I think that's it in order to keep your roster construction, keep going. But if you got to pay him 60, you got to pay him 60, right? You got to keep that guy around because he's shown enough that he's talented enough to play in your offense, and he can help you get to a Super Bowl. He's gotten you to a Super Bowl once, so he can do it again.
They paid Jimmy G. They regretted it, but they paid him. So
I mean, I think everyone who's paid Jimmy G's regretted it, right? So
yeah, I'm got my Raiders hat on. I can't talk. I'm in the glass house too. Can't throw stones. All right. The last division here, the NFC South, the worst division in football. We'll start with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Projected win total was 7.5. You went over, I went under. So they end up winning 10 games. They go 10-7. What did you see about this team? What did you get right?
No, I mean, I thought Baker played pretty consistently the year before, and I thought that was going to carry over into this year. I think you predicted some slight regression from him. But he played. I think he played just as well, if not better, this year.
He went nuts. He went
nuts, right? He went insane, right? Okay, so he went even
4,500 yards. All that 4,500 yards.
Let's hear it.
41 touchdowns, 16 interceptions, which I think is reasonable, and it throw in another 3 or 4 rushing touchdowns. So yeah, he went crazy.
He went insane. So he exceeded what I thought he was going to do. I thought he was going to be pretty good this year and keep that play up. He did even better than that. I think that was the difference, right? Their defense is, I want to say it was probably average, probably somewhere around like 16-20. So I think that was like Baker. I don't know. Baker's found his home. He's playing well. He's good for him. He was a bit of a douchebag on the Browns to start his career, but I'm glad I'm actually happy for his redemption story now. Like he seems to have turned it around. Even like, I don't know, maybe it was just like he was just being like, because of his play, he's being more extra like douchey. But now he seems like he's like pretty decent guy now. Like I don't know, like maybe his play and his how he acts on off the field is connected. And I'm sure it's connected for a lot of players, but like it's a good turnaround for Baker Mayfield, and he's doing well with the Bucs.
Yeah, that swag and attitude he has, it works when you're winning. When you're losing, it's like you're just being annoying. But yeah, I was wrong. I definitely did not expect him to go insane like this and have an MVP caliber season, all pro type season, even though he didn't make the Pro Bowl. And there's just a lot of good quarterbacks in the NFC. So he was on the outside looking in, but yeah, defense was bang average. They were 16th. A lot of weapons. They obviously missed Chris Godwin, but Mike Evans is still there. Cade Otton was there for a long time. Bucky Irving he also went crazy, stole the job from Rachaad White. He had a couple costly fumbles, but one of the best rookie running backs, one of the best running backs in the NFC this year. And they lost a few games in the middle of the season that were really fluky. They had the overtime game against Atlanta where Irving lost that fumble. They lose in overtime to Kansas City where they didn't even touch the ball. So there's a case or a season where they go 12-5, and we're having a different conversation about them. So credit to Tampa and Baker, and I'm really glad he's succeeding while Cleveland is failing, because I'm a Browns hater or a City of Cleveland hater, and they had their franchise quarterback and they let him go for Deshaun Watson. So we'll get to the Browns next. The Atlanta Falcons, over-under was 9.5. They go under by 1.5 games. You went over, I went under. What did you get wrong about this team?
Yeah, Kirk Cousins was not quite the answer there. And I think they maybe realized that a little bit later into this, like the last 2 games of the season. They're like, oh yeah, maybe we shouldn't be playing Kirk Cousins. I think their offense was not great. It was just okay. Even though they had some talented guys like Bijan Robinson, like started killing it towards the end. He was struggling in the beginning. Drake London had some pretty good games, but then, like, I don't know, Kirk Cousins had a really weird season. Defense was, I want to say, about average. They weren't as good as anticipated. I do think if they played Michael Penix Jr., they would have they might have had 2 more wins if they started played them maybe like halfway through the season instead of the last 2-3 games down the stretch here.
They did have a really weird season. They started hot. Kirk looked good, great, almost. He had like a 5-touchdown game against Tampa. They beat the Eagles in the last second. At one point, they were 6-3. And then I think the physicality got to Kirk, and he just wasn't able to hold up, and they lost a bunch of games. I think they went on a 5-game losing streak, and they start Penix the last 3 games of the season trying to save it. He goes 1-2, but I think he looked really good in that 1-2 stretch, which, I mean, they lost to Washington and they lost to Carolina the last game of the season, but the game didn't really matter once Tampa won, so I wouldn't really hold that against him. So I'm with you. If they started him like week 10, I think they probably would have won this division and made the playoffs. So, I mean, tough break for them, but at least they have their franchise quarterback, I think. So we kind of clown them for the pick, but they just pick Michael Penix. Don't sign Kirk Cousins to $150 million contract.
Yeah, because they gave Cousins a bunch of money, and then they drafted a guy at number 8 overall.
They probably could have just signed, I don't know, name a veteran quarterback, Andy Dalton, and they could have had the same result where, you know, they're 500 at the middle of the season, and then you hand the reins over to Penix, and they wouldn't have this crazy situation where they owe this dude a bunch of money, but it's not my problem. All right, the Carolina Panthers, their projected win total was 5.5. They go under by half a game, going 5-12. We both went under on this team. I think we were both right. So what did we get right about this team?
Yeah, I think we basically said, hey, you know, they're going to struggle still on offense. Defense is not great, and that's kind of what it is. Bryce Young did struggle very early on. He got benched for Andy Dalton for a few games, and then comes back in and starts killing it towards the end of the season. So definitely exciting times for the Panthers ahead, right? It looks like Bryce Young is a franchise quarterback maybe, and they got some weapons to go with him. They're probably going to draft another weapon here in this draft, build on that defense. So I think the future is decent for the Panthers in the next couple of years. And you know, Canales looks like a pretty good offensive coach, and he somehow turned around Bryce Young. Like, everyone's like, what are you doing? Why does Bryce Young look so bad? And then you bench him, and he turns it around, and it's like, oh wow, this guy's a genius, right? So, let's see what the future holds for Bryce Young. I think the Panthers go in whatever direction Bryce Young goes.
Yeah, he finished the season the last 3 weeks. He only started 12 games. Last 3 weeks, he had 7 touchdowns, no picks, and in general was running a little bit more, so showing off some of that athleticism. I mean, he's not like a Kyler Murray level athlete, but he is slippery. And as long as he's not taking those big shots, I think he can, you know, use his legs. So I think they answered the big question: is there a potential future with Bryce Young? And for a while, it looked like they were going to get the number 1 pick, and now I think they're picking 8th. So they're out of the quarterback sweepstakes. I think they're like, okay, we have this guy under a rookie contract at least for 2 more years. Let's see where we can go. And I mean, I think the future maybe is not super bright, but at least it's not as gloomy as it was. They had the quarterback question answered at least. Last, the New Orleans Saints projected line was 7.5. You went under, I went over. They ended up going 5-12. So what did you get right about this team?
I mean, I think I got right. I did tell you that Derek Carr's going to miss some games, and that's what he did, right? He missed some games. Alvin Kamara missed some games. I think their defense wasn't great. They got shredded a couple of times. People wanted Spencer Rattler to begin the season, and then they saw Spencer Rattler and like, bring back Derek Carr. So I don't know what the Saints' plan is here, but obviously Carr is not in a place anymore where he's going to be, like, he could be a bridge guy. I don't think he's going to be like the future of that franchise. So they got to figure out what's their quarterback plan after Carr. They got to figure out what are, like, Olave has a major concussion like history now. So that's another guy you kind of like have to worry about. Defense doesn't look great. So I don't know. The Saints are kind of in shambles, and I mean, maybe they move on from Derek Carr, right? Because like probably unfair to keep that guy around for what's going to be looking like a rebuild.
Yeah, there's a big possibility. He has 2 more years on his deal. Saints Reddit is alive with talk of releasing him and what the impact would be. So it's possible that they do that and he ends up somewhere else. I think it's similar to the Niners. They kind of had a season from hell. They go 5-5 with Carr, and 0-7 without him. So, you fall a couple games short of your over-under, and he's missing 7 games. Maybe he wins 3 of those, and you end up hitting. So, I think in the long run, it's probably better for them that they went 5-12. They get a top 10 pick. Maybe they decide, okay, we can move on. We'll get a new head coach. Yeah, they fired Dennis Allen halfway through the season, and he was awful. They fired him after losing to Carolina when he made a horrible decision to punt on 4th and short when they could have won the game. So we don't need to get into details there. But yeah, they lose Olave. They lose Rashid Shaheed, Taysom Hill halfway through the season. I think he only plays half the season. Kamara gets hurt at the end, but at that point, it's a one-man show. So they did have a similar to the Niners where they had a season from hell with injuries, but obviously without the expectations of the Niners. So that's it for the NFC. Say biggest surprise and biggest disappointment for you.
I'll go biggest surprise, Minnesota Vikings. Just because we did not expect them to come out and kill it. Biggest disappointment, what call it, the Niners. No one could have predicted what happened to them, so I will stick by that. That's the biggest disappointment.
Yeah, just to be different, I'll go with Washington as the biggest surprise for me because,
sure. Yeah,
Minnesota, you could have talked yourself into some kind of scenario. Like, oh, maybe if Darnold is great, they could be good. But Washington, I didn't think we saw a path. We thought even if Jaden Daniels was really good, they would still be, kind of a middling team. But they end up being, one of the better teams in the NFL and win 12 games. So that's it for the NFC. We'll be doing the AFC in a couple days. So it'll be after Wild Card Weekend. So we'll have a little bit of a different angle with some potential disappointments if one of these top seeds falls short. So thank you guys for checking us out. Make sure to hit the subscribe button wherever you're listening or watching this podcast. And thank you, Sulman. Appreciate you, man.
Thanks, man. Peace.